Well, hello there to our audience. Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable, where we interview today's top leaders, church leaders, thought leaders, and good friends of mine, many of them, to talk about what's going on in the church world and how we can face society today and minister in effective ways. And so today I have the distinct privilege and pleasure to have my good friend, Pastor Kevin Bordeaux, on the episode. Kevin went on a journey from battling addiction to leading a revitalized church. And after a radical conversion at 19, Kevin explored his musical passions before heeding a call to pastoral ministry. This has culminated in his leadership at Thrive Church, which he transformed from a dwindling congregation to a vibrant community. And alongside his ministry, Kevin is a devoted father, a sports team coach for his son Dawson, and a freelance writer for Christian ministry websites. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Really, really excited to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man. Just get to hang out with a friend. I appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. You too, man. So just to kind of give our audience a sense of who you are. I know I kind of alluded to some things there, but I would love
Yeah.
for you to kind of just talk about your story, what brought you to where you are today. What kind of is the essence of what makes you who you are?
Yeah. Well, man, my heart is, church planting and revitalizing or relaunch and replanting. So I've been in Richmond now 12 years and came here from South Florida from a church plant there, and I raised a guy to take it over and moved here in 2012 to, as you said, a congregation of 20 people and a very good facility, 20 people, and just a lot of belief, faith, and a lot of good coaching from people. And so since then, we've planted four churches out of our church, and our heart,
It's
man, is just
awesome.
our heart's to plant churches, to give other guys platforms, and to be, I think to be a friend to the churches in Richmond, and that we really care about like the big C church, and it's not a competition. It's us coming together to reach the unchurched people of Richmond with all different types of churches and ministries in different areas. So that's my heart. And then the other part of me too is not only church ministry, but also, emotional health and healing from trauma and dealing with that. And that's a big passion of mine, is helping, especially pastors. We get into ministry for all the wrong reasons, and then we
Yeah.
suffer in ministry. And then, I think my other thing is, you said my son, he's my world. I love that dude. We do everything together. And then, and I love strength training and performance training. So I do that. It's my hobby on the side to kind of get me out of church mindset and church world. Yeah.
I get that, man. You know what? I'd love to kind of think about this and pulling this thread a little bit because you're talking about mental health and you're talking about, church planting, and those two things are connected and
Yeah.
sometimes not in the best way. And you
Yeah.
said a really interesting phrase. You said we get into ministry for ourselves. I'd love for you to kind of talk about more of what you mean by that and
Yeah.
what have you seen are the biggest needs in terms of mental health for pastors, church planners, and people in Christian leadership.
Yeah, well, I think we get into it for all the wrong reasons. Now, we do have noble motives. Don't get me wrong. When we do want to
That's
teach the
what you said. All
Bible,
the wrong reasons.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
Yes.
no, no, no. So I think we do have like motives to want to teach the Bible and be able to do. But I think the key is we're seeking validation. We didn't get validation from our father or our mother, or we were just invalidated, didn't feel good enough. And then we preach our first sermon, at that traditional church, and all the older gentlemen walk up and say, "I'm so proud of you," and you preached a great sermon. No,
Yeah.
now it's the worst sermon you ever preached. And we think in our heart, I would love to get that type of validation the rest of my life and get people just to validate me. And then you get into pastoral ministry, you realize all you deal with is problems, and you deal with 90% criticism, and you may get 5 to 10% validation.
Yes.
And I think inside of that, there's a lot of things to unpack with it. But on a surface level, we're trying to fill our cup up of not feeling good enough, for the wrong reasons. We're trying to get people in the church to validate us. We're trying to grow a church to prove our self-worth, and
Mm,
whatever it is, to make a mark. We're building buildings. We're just so everything's grandiose. Everything's amazing. We're cookie cutter pictures on social media.
totally.
And deep inside under the layers, is a child who's just screaming, "Daddy, I want your approval."
Wow.
So. Yeah. I mean, that's really, I think, in a nutshell, what I have experienced in my own life. I wasn't good enough for my dad. He was a perfectionist, and is an invalidator. In my whole life, I just grew up not liking myself or loving myself. And then I
Mm,
had the opportunity for ministry, and ministry also fulfills this need for cortisol and crisis, because we
mm,
love cortisol, we love dopamine, and so we kind of get hits of it from workaholism. And then eventually, what happens is the invalidation, our cups aren't filled, the constant being on the go all the time, fixing problems, constantly working, we end up crashing in many different ways. Some it may be addiction, others may be an affair, others may be, they just overeat themselves into a grave. I mean, whatever it is, there's so many, ways. But I sit with guys, and I'll have the privilege to sit and have lunch with them, and or talk on the phone with them, and they're leading great churches, but you never know how empty they are inside. They just don't like it. They don't enjoy it. There's just, they've been through so much pain. And again, it's one of those things. The way that I was able to fix that in my life was to heal from childhood trauma and to
mm.
deal with that head on. So now I don't need validation. Now I have boundaries. Now I do, I do what I want to when I want to. And if I don't want to do something or respond, I don't do it. I was a people pleaser. I was a codependent.
Sure.
And so anyway, I think that's a lot I just said there. So I'll let you, ask questions or comment, but that's what I've seen from pastors, and why guys burn out and leave the ministry.
I mean, that is so profound, dude. And I definitely am sympathetic to what you're saying. Like, we have seen it time and time again, right? We don't excuse me, have to name the names,
Yeah,
but I don't even think we need to, for people to just, there's just going to start popping up. Anyone who's been in church long enough, they're going to start remembering and popping up the names of people, that large churches that have fallen
yeah,
into disrepute, that have had some kind of moral failure, that built these
yeah,
huge, kingdoms. I mean,
yeah,
for lack of a better term. And I'm not saying that that's all they wanted to do, but like, it's like, what is enough? And I've thought about that. Like, when is the
yeah,
church big enough? When do you
yeah,
have
yeah,
enough money? When have enough people been baptized, or enough people?
yep,
And again, like, part of it's like, well, how can we say enough people are baptized? There's so much need out there. There's so much, there's so much evil in the world. There's so much, whatever it is you want to
yeah,
say, but you've hit on a real nerve that I want to continue to push into, this idea of mental health, and
hmm,
how do we actually deal with the feelings of inadequacy,
hmm,
the
yeah,
feelings of we're trying to prove something to
yes,
someone. Maybe, and I get, like, a lot of it comes down to proving it to our dads or our
hmm,
moms or our parents, or those
yeah,
people in some kind of authority that we had in our life. And even like that journey that you've been on, maybe even dig deeper into that. Cause I think, bro, honestly, for guys that listen to this, and I really hope that they do, and I hope a lot of people do, for the reason that I hope that someone listens to it and they say, "Hey, my pastor needs to hear this," or that I need to hear this, or my brother who's in the ministry, or or my cousin who's trying to figure things out. They need to hear this, that this idea of burnout and trying to fill some void, and the reasons that we struggle so much. Kind of dive deeper into that. What
yeah.
has that process been like? How have you seen it done well? How have you seen it done really, really badly?
That's good, man. Well, I think really badly, first of all, you just ignore it and you don't want to deal with it. I don't have that. My life's great. I'm good. And anybody, I just thought about this quote today. If you don't deal with your childhood trauma, it's going to eventually deal with you.
Mm,
And it's going to show up. If you don't show it up, it's going to show up, and it only gets worse. Mental health gets worse as you become an adult. It does not get better. And so anxiety, depression, those things left untreated, and the roots left untreated will do that. And so I think, and this is for everybody, not just, pastors, but as we're speaking kind of
yeah.
the faith world and the church world, I think everybody has to deal with that, because in any relationship, no matter it's parental, church, work, romantic, we are again, will reproduce what we grew up in. And a lot of times we're punishing our spouse for things we haven't dealt with in our heart, right? And things in our life. And so I think that the number one thing, my journey really, man, started, gosh, man, it was, maybe I was 26 when this first concept really first started hitting me. But I had a professor tell me, he said, man, you're way too perfectionistic. I don't know like where you get this from, who caused this with you, but you need to seek the Lord and make sure you deal with that. This is harmful. And we were just walking to chapel. So it was like I was in his office and it resonated. I'm like, man, where is this? And, it was that master's program. And one night they had a Wednesday night kind of like little small gathering for pastors and went to somebody's house to just pray and, let the Lord minister. And man, Dr. Garnet Pike, who's, is an amazing man of God, he just began to call things out about my dad. And I'm like, wow, and there's Rick and Beverly Haug were there, never forget that. And so it started unpacking. So this has been a journey now of almost 20 years of going through this, of layers. And I think the key is what I realized, I didn't really know myself. I didn't know who I really was, and I didn't love myself. Deep inside, I was a kid, I was always a fat kid. Growing up, my buddies were the models, the supermodels who had all the girls, and I was the tag along fat kid. And I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I didn't really love myself. And over the past, I think, year to 2 years, I came to a lot of realizations that I was a people pleaser, and I did not. Again, Jesus doesn't say just love God and love people. He says love God, love yourself, and then love people the way that, the same way in which you love yourself. Many of us don't like ourselves. We just beat ourselves up all the time. So for me, counseling was very important. I've been through several bouts of counseling, and I've had some amazing counselors. And then, man, I'm telling you, reading books on PTSD, complex PTSD, recovering from that, has been huge for me. And so for me, I think counseling, and one of my best friends, his mom's a world-renowned, psychologist and psychotherapist, so he knows a lot. He's helped me, but over the past year, not getting to too much, my life has been completely transformed. I was in narcissistic relationships in church, and then, in a relationship, and I just, man, everything unraveled for me, and my life was horrible. I was abused by people. And I got to the place I realized that, I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't have self-worth. I lived by a sense of shame. And so that journey, Josh, took me where I had to learn to love myself again. And then a book called Complex PTSD by Pete Walker is one of the greatest books. You can put that in the show notes. It'd be great. Links there. That book helped me understand that we have a wounded inner child, and we have an inner critic that's always speaking to us. You're not good enough. How could you be so stupid when your church isn't big enough? If you'd have handled that better, they wouldn't have left, or whatever it is. But that inner critic, that's the voice of the parent in our life that wounded us. And it becomes our voice. Their voice as a child becomes our voice, right? And then it speaks to that wounded inner child. And then you're constantly in this cycle of beating yourself up. You don't believe you deserve better. You don't believe you deserve the best. You're not proud of yourself, So I went through learning that I need to reparent myself. That now I'm the adult, and that wounded inner child needs to understand that I will not put up with abuse. I'll not put up with gaslighting. I'll not put up with tomfoolery, and that I will cut you out of my life quicker than than a doctor want to cut out cancer in your body. I will get rid of you if you don't have my best interest in mind. If you're someone who's going to gaslight and abuse me and treat me wrong, I don't, So what I did, there was 3 things that were really huge that got me to this journey, and I'll quickly go through those. The first thing was forgiving myself. I sat down with myself and I did some mindful meditation, which again, it's a practice where I sat down and sat with myself over lunch. Because, I'll sit with pastors at lunch and I'm encouraging them. I'm helping them get out of the ditch. And I sat with myself and I say, hey, listen, man, I forgive you for the past mistakes you've made, the dumb decisions, the things you're forgiven. And I just forgave myself,
Wow.
and stop beating myself up over, why didn't just all the hindsight's 2020 questions. The second thing that I did after I learned to forgive myself was then be proud of myself and love myself. And I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, man, I'm really proud of you. All that you've been through and you've come through. Like, do you understand all you've accomplished in life? And man, I'm really proud of you. And I'm proud of all you've overcome. And it was very emotional going through this. One of the things I had to do as well was I had to forgive my grandfather for killing himself. My grandmother had cancer when I was young. My grandfather killed himself and he abandoned me. He abandoned us. And I was always angry. I hated him. I was like, you, and his death note was, my nerves can't handle this. I'm like, great, dude. I'm an 8, 9 year old kid. I guess I'll handle it for you. I'll take care of grandma. You stupid son of, I mean, I had
Yeah.
no remorse,
Yeah.
like, yeah, and so, but I always had this fear of abandonment because my mom showed up at school. I was supposed to ride the tractor with him. She shows up at school and she says, "Hey, I need to talk to you. Your grandfather he committed suicide." And I was like, "What suicide? I've never heard that." Well, he shot himself. Well, why did it was an accident? What does that mean? No, he intentionally killed himself. And I was just like, dude, my brain couldn't
Oh
comprehend
my
it as a little
gosh.
child. Yeah, I was just like, and I was supposed to ride the tractor with him. And so, so my whole life, I've always had the sky is falling where at any time I can have mom show up at the doorstep when life's going good and tell me grandfather's killed himself, right?
Right.
So I always
Right.
lived with that fear of abandonment, the fear of loss. And I had this thing. And so when I identified it, the Lord really led me to, you've got to go sit down with your grandfather. And again, it's imaginary. Your brain doesn't know the difference between
Sure.
fantasy and reality. So I sat down with my grandfather and I said, to kill yourself, that is, I couldn't imagine what you were going through. And I'm really sorry for judging you. And I can't imagine the pain that you were facing. And he always was the outcast of the family because he's my step grandfather. My real grandfather died when my dad was 13. So, and I said, hey, I identify with you. I never feel like I fit in either. And I feel like I'm an outcast. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry for what you went through. And, my grandmother was well taken care of. We did take care of her. And I want you to know I love you. And I appreciate all that you did for me. And so that was a huge step, man, in doing that. And then the final piece of all that where, you forgive yourself, you begin to tell yourself you love yourself, you're proud of yourself, you tie up any loose ends of people you really trauma you need to deal with. And then from that, I learned to establish boundaries in my life. I learned to express my needs, my wants, and my expectations where I can now, say, hey, that doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. I mean, long story short, I am divorced. And so that was something too. I never had any boundaries and I just
Mm.
lived to please this woman. I did everything for her. And, a long story short, the marriage didn't work out. We were on two separate tracks with faith and different things.
Right.
And that was really harmful and hurtful. But what I realized out of that was I never voiced what I needed. I never voiced my expectations. I never, I was just always whatever you want, whatever you want. And I thought I was doing something great where I had no identity. I didn't know myself. I didn't know who I really was and what I really wanted and
Wow.
what I would and wouldn't put up with. And so learning to set boundaries and to tell someone this does not work for me. I'm not going to do this, to share needs, wants, and expectations out of that, is the healed version of me where I've learned to say no a lot. Dude, yeah, listen, I still have residual things that come up and you still face these residual, like the
Of
one
course.
day out of nowhere. Man, I'm just enjoying church. I love the people that are here. They have been through hell with me, man. And I genuinely love coming on Sundays and just hanging out with them and talking to them and seeing them. And, I'm enjoying ministry. And there's seasons we grow, there's seasons we plateau. There's seasons everything's going great. And there's seasons there's a lot of chaos. But I've learned to
Yes.
love and enjoy ministry more than ever. I love and enjoy my life more than ever. I think that's the journey, long story short, that I've been on that's helped me as a pastor. And I think where pastors go wrong is we think, a couple months of counseling or reading the books won't fix it. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to deal with our trauma. We don't want to deal with and really uncover, and we don't know who we are. If I asked you, hey, Josh, who are you? Well, I'm, I have River, the River
Yeah.
City
River
Underground,
City
right?
Underground.
Yeah,
I got,
and
I'm
faithful
married. I got,
politics. But who are you? And what do you really want? Like, what do you really, I mean, who are you? And I think that's the question I had to begin to answer. And I began to really say, I'm someone who just loves to help people. I do. I enjoy helping others. That's a person I am. No matter what, like today at the gym, there's a guy who came up and I helped him with strength training and nutrition. So I started answering questions in that realm. I love to help people. I love to be able to see people progress and grow in their life. And for me, simple things like what do I want to eat? I really want to eat this. I don't want to eat that. And that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to spend my money on that. I don't care. I'm not going to do that. And going through
yeah.
a dating process, I'm telling you, man, it's a different world. And a lot of pastors teach on
Oh my
dating and,
word.
and, and they're doing a terrible disservice to it because I thought the thing was, how you're young, you meet that one person, you go get married, this is great. But
Yeah.
I had to learn in that process to vocalize my needs, wants, and expectations and my boundaries. That I love myself.
Mm.
I have self-worth, and no, that will not work for me. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to do that. Um,
Yes.
this is what I really want to do. So it's been a long journey, but I think I'm on the side now. The Lord was just showing me the other day when I was in prayer, like I was reading Mark, and Jesus talks about the blade or the seed, the blade, the stalk, the process of growth,
Yeah,
the
one of my
mustard
favorite.
seed. Yeah, and the mustard seed and how it grows to be the largest. And we talk about mustard seed and largest, but we don't talk about the process to become that. And
Yes.
every seed starts in soil, and they love that soil. That soil is warm. It has the nutrients it needs, but it has to be broken. There has to be a breaking of that seed, the outer shell, for the life within that to grow. And so
Mm.
God will bring us through seasons of extreme brokenness in dark places. And then Lord showed me, He said, now you're now seeing the light. You're now like seeing light. You're seeing feeling the warmth of the sun. You're experiencing the rain. And it's just kind of show me that part of my life where I'm at, and it's really exciting. I mean, to be on the process of healing. You're never healed. You're always on a continuum of that. So
I mean, dude, there's been so much that you just said that I resonated with, and there's a part of it that I want to concentrate on, but before I get there, I've always appreciated your transparency. I've always appreciated your authenticity when it comes to real struggles. I feel the very same way. I feel a lot of camaraderie with you because
yeah, amen.
ministry is like I can't get it out of my blood. I can't get it out of my head that it's what God wants me to do. And I have a seriously, sometimes I feel like I have a love-hate abusive relationship with
Yes,
ministry where it's abusing me and then I
yes,
start to abuse it, the concept in
yes.
my mind, and I get
Mm,
angry and I say all sorts of harsh things, and it's never to people that are in the church, right? The only people that will ever hear it are my family or just me, right? And I say all sorts of like terrible things, especially even like about myself, and hearing you on this journey. Like, I just love getting there and being with the people who are there. And I
mm,
cannot get out of my mind just like this idea of growth versus depth.
yeah.
And like I want the church to grow. I want the church to grow. And I just think I want it to grow. I want it to grow more. It's not enough. And it's small right now. But why do I want
Hmm.
it to grow? Well, I need there's money that's to be made, you know what I mean? Not like I'm getting a lot of money, but we struggle financially,
Yeah.
sometimes in some months. And it's tough. And I don't want that. And then I want to feel validated, and I want to feel like I can
Mm,
talk to my friends and tell them how great things are going, or to my pastor friends. And you talked about shame
yeah.
and how like so much of what you're doing was motivated by shame. And I know I'm kind of
Yes.
going all over the place,
Yes.
so
That's
maybe
good, man.
we'll focus on that part right there,
Look,
like
dude,
the
that
shame
one.
motivation. Let's
That
talk
one
about that.
word,
Go ahead.
that one word. Okay, so interesting too. A book that really helped me, my counselor gave me was "Worthiness for Men and Women" by Brene Brown, and
Mm,
she talks about shame. Beautiful audiobook, man. It's like 2 hours long, and it transformed me because toxic. When you have shame in your life, you will also then begin to want to create. You also then want to blame others. Toxic shame creates toxic blame. And that whole shame inside of someone's heart that was created by their parents, whether their parents intentionally did it or didn't mean to do it, and Christianity can create shame. I mean, the way we
oh
treat
yeah.
holiness can create such a shameful attitude that, oh man, you did this, so you should be ashamed of that, right? And so, but that shame is again that inner child. And people who deal with shame in their life, it's a terrible motivator because you're always trying to work to prove. You're always basing yourself on standards you can never achieve. You're not okay with not being okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's like my son. If he's sad or upset or angry, I said you can experience any emotion, son, and I'll support you in it. It's okay to be sad and be angry. Those are human emotions. You cannot take it out on others when you feel that way, though. And that's what we can't do. But that's what we do. Shame makes you do that. So when someone has a shame problem, they have an anger problem because they feel so shameful, so then they
Yes.
lash out and they're not proud of themselves. And I think that's the number one thing people have to deal with is this toxic shame that's like an infection that runs through their blood. And it's sad, man. I mean, I've seen people close up that are just, man, they cannot have intimate relationships because of the deep sense of shame that they won't deal with. And it's just sad. But no, but I mean, that one word there, man, if we can deal with that and begin to turn shame into self-worth and self-love, as Jesus commanded us to, love yourself. I believe that's the key to it all, is learning to be proud of yourself, to love yourself, to, to even like, so for me, kind of going and doing a meditation practice, talking to my childhood self, telling them, hey man, I'm really, listen, you're a special kid. God's gonna do great things with you. You don't deserve the abuse that your parents are, that's happening to you. And it's not your fault, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. And they don't know. And just going through those simple practices, man, have helped me really crush that shame in my life. But yeah, that's that one word,
Yeah.
man. You unpacked a lot there.
Well, dude, I mean, I feel like so many times I'm in an abusive relationship with myself.
Yes,
I mean, the
yes,
things that I say to myself, I wouldn't say to my kids.
that's right.
I would feel like that would be verbal abuse to
Hmm.
say that to my children, that would do violence to their soul. And yet I say these really terrible things to myself.
Yes,
Or, I have gotten so angry in my life that I've hit myself before, that I've
yeah,
gotten so
yes,
mad that
yeah,
I've been and it's like, and then I would sit in judgment over people that self-harmed,
yeah,
and be like, that's crazy, or someone who's cutting themselves or something like that. And I don't mean to make light of any of that. Like,
yeah,
it's like it comes from the same place. This
yeah,
place of like deep shame and anger and yeah, because how do you deal with the shame? I don't know how to deal with it. I guess then my natural reaction is just going to be angry, and when I'm angry, then it's just going to come out in whatever way seems best in the time when my mind can't even think straight
yeah.
because I'm seeing red or whatever it is. And how do you deal? Like, what you've kind of alluded to it in the conversation so far, but how do you deal with shame as a pastor?
Hmm.
And obviously it can then, I know that there are principles that can move over into anyone, right? It's not just that pastors
Oh
deal with
yeah, oh
this.
yeah,
Many people. How do you deal with that?
yeah.
And what kind of habits have you developed?
Well, I think you got to go back to the root. I'm listening to a book by David Seaman's, and it's called "Healing for Damaged Emotions." It was released back in the '60s, and I have a wonderful, godly, older Christian gentleman who's got knew David, and so I've been going through that. And again, I think he said, "You shall know them by their fruit, but you'll understand them by their root." Like we
Mm.
often look. So I think for us, it's getting to the root. Where did this come from? It's like, whenever the guy lost his axe head, Elisha said, show me where you lost it, right? Like you've got to go back before you can ever see God work in something. You got to go back to where it happened. And it may be abuse that you've suppressed. I mean, I've really searched my mind and like, like for different types of abuse and all that I've been through. But the source of shame came primarily from my dad and, things like this. So number one, I had to identify it. You got it. Where'd it come from? Where'd you lose it at? Let's go back to that. Then what traumatic events triggered that? You know, and it could be negative events, and then it could be just not being able to live up to their approval. No matter how good I did, it wasn't good enough. And I think with that, that's where you have to unpack a lot, Josh. That means you got to go back and do some forgiving. And I call it mindfulness, where you go do a practice where you sit down with the person, and you may not be able to sit down with that person physically if they're dead, or it's just not going to be worth it to talk to them. They're a narcissist, or they're someone who doesn't care about that stuff. You won't be able to really sit down with them, but you got to deal with that and say, okay, I identified it. This is where it's come from. I need to forgive. I need to heal from that. There's something too, man. Your brain with neuroplasticity and you can rewrite your neural pathways. Because
Yeah.
the problem is your neural pathways get set once you have trauma and abuse, and then you only know one exit off the ramp. You've got to close that exit and create new exits to be able to go new places. And one of the things I did was, which again, people may say, "Oh, I don't believe it," whatever. I mean, I'm not here to have to explain or justify anything to you. This has been helpful for me.
Sure.
Like for instance, to rewrite the story also of my dad chased me around the house with a shotgun on my 13th birthday.
Mm.
And me and my mom slept in the truck outside. Dad shot a hole in the ceiling, and it's things like that. So I actually what would have looked like if it would have been differently, and just to think about, man, where was Jesus at and all that? He was right there with me, protecting me. And then also too, I went through and did a practice where my dad celebrated my birthday with me. Your brain doesn't know the difference. It can't tell fantasy and reality. And so you're training your brain to rewrite neural pathways. And so you got to, however you can deal with it, you see a professional counselor and talk about the parental issues, deal with the complex PTSD, and don't compare your trauma to someone else's. To say, well, I had really good parents. Well, I talked to a gentleman the other day, and he's great, man. He's again an older gentleman, a lot of wisdom. He said, my parents were really good, but I didn't feel like I mattered or I had a
Mm.
voice at times. They didn't mean to that, but that's just the way they did it. So now I feel like I don't matter. He said, even talking to you right now, I feel like, why would this guy want to talk to me? So once you identify, you look at those root issues, you got to heal those root issues, and you got to go through practice with those. And now in the future, in your current reality today, though, you've got to learn to love and be kind to yourself. You know, you got to look yourself in the mirror, Josh, and say, "Hey, dude, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're a wonderful person. Yeah,
Mm.
everybody fails. I mean, whatever your thing is, some of them is workaholism, others alcoholism, whatever it's porn or whatever. Everybody does. Learn to be very kind to yourself. And that's one of the keys to shame, because shame wants you to beat yourself up and you can do better and you can do
Absolutely.
more. And again, I see guys I play basketball with who are 50 something year old men going around, you're so stupid, saying it to themselves. How could you miss that? Like screaming. I'm like, man, I bet their
Mm.
dad did that to them. That's their dad talking to them and they never fixed.
Yeah.
So be kind to yourself, learn to love yourself, learn to forgive yourself. And that's how you heal from shame, man. And you're going to fail. You're going to mess up. I had to learn to stop apologizing so much. My shame caused me to say I'm sorry too much. I had a gentleman in our
Yeah.
church, one of our board members one time, and he sat down with me. He said, we were just talking one day. He said, Pastor, can I just tell you something? He said, please stop apologizing. He said, I don't want you to hear you say, it's just me and him. I don't want you to hear you say I'm sorry anymore. Okay. I don't know why you say that so much. We don't need to. I did. So I stopped apologizing for things. I stopped beating myself up. If I can't listen, because in ministry, you can't get to everybody and everything, right?
Right.
It's impossible. And as a church grows, I'm telling you, man, I'm not able to, right? And I really felt like all I did was disappoint people. I was like,
Yes.
all right. I told somebody, I said, what I do is I get up every day and I wonder who am I going to disappoint today because I can't meet their expectations and standards that they want from me, right? I don't feel that way anymore, man. I had a guy say, "Hey, man, I want your phone number. I want to meet with you every week." I said, "I'm not able to do that." I mean, I have campus pastors who are, awesome. They're top level. I don't meet with them every week. I'm
Right.
just not able to. And I don't know if he still comes or not. I hadn't seen him. I would have beat myself up and said, "Man, I just couldn't do it for some guy who just started attending and is not connected, but then wants
Yeah.
to come just meet with me." But hey, listen, I'm gonna spend time with my son in the evenings. I have a certain schedule. I have certain so anyway, I've had to learn to be kind to myself with that and love myself, be proud of myself, set healthy boundaries, and understand that people who love you, Josh, in your church will respect your boundaries and love your boundaries. They will celebrate your
Hmm.
boundaries. People who are abusing you will get mad when you have boundaries.
Hmm.
You say, I would love to, but I just can't make that. I would love to, but I'm not able to. And like Michael Hyatt says, you don't even need to give an explanation. They don't deserve one. I mean, unless you feel that person is somebody close enough to you, I'd love to, but I just can't make that. Why over explain yourself? Right? You're a
I
people
always
pleasing.
feel like I have to give an explanation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's things that I've learned now and I'm not a jerk. I mean, I love our people. And man, I do believe the principle, do for one what you can't do for all. And so there are
Yeah.
people in our church. I got lunch with a young man, a few weeks from now, and man, he doesn't really serve, he's not really connected, but he comes, and but I just feel like I want to have lunch with him. I want to pour into him. Can I do it for everybody? I can't do it for everybody. So at any rate, I think that's the things that we have to deal with. But all those, see, the problem is that then makes you more shameful, Josh, when
Right.
you can't make the meeting then you're like, well, I just disappointed him. Gosh, man, if I was a better leader, I could manage my time better. I wouldn't have all these obligations. Like you just, and
Exactly.
it's a cycle, and shame just keeps digging a hole deeper and deeper. You'll never get out of.
And that is so good, man, because I know that there are other people that are dealing with this. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously there are, but I think there's probably even more than we think. Not
Yeah,
everybody. I wouldn't say everybody. I mean, I know everybody's got their whatever it is,
yeah,
their issue that they have to deal with. But maybe I'll put it this way: not everyone deals with it to the level that I do. I would
yes,
say.
yes,
Maybe that's a better way to put it, because I think we all have to deal with those issues of shame and honor, just like it was in the scripture, in the cultures of the Bible. We have our own way of interpreting honor and shame, but in our society doesn't necessarily run by those things, but we still shame people. We, we
hmm
we love to shame people,
we do.
and we call it canceling or whatever it is, right? But we love to shame people, and I would love to take this and connect it to this idea of church growth versus the kind of spiritual maturity and depth that you're talking about. Like,
Yeah,
what I'm hearing you say, that is a deep level of maturity and growth. To your own admission, you said it's taken decades, right? Not just years, right?
hmm
Decades. You have to measure the time in decades. How does this affect your ministry in terms of wanting the church to grow, wanting to be able to reach more people, be help, because right, it's about helping people, so help more
hmm
people.
yeah.
We want to do that. How have you tried to balance that? What have you learned about that? And what are your general thoughts in balancing these goals of growing the church numerically? I'm saying
Hmm. Hmm.
specifically numerically versus growing it in its depth, deepening the spiritual maturity of those who are already there.
I think two things. Number one, you can never pit those two against each other.
Hmm.
Those both have to be goals, which is evangelism and discipleship. And a lot of times we say, well, that church is evangelistic, not very discipleship based. I think a pastor has to care deeply about reaching people far from God and also about seeing people really, reach their potential in Christ, right? There has to be like this dual desire. And again, if you don't deal with your trauma, you're going to pursue things. So some guys feel like they can't win at all and they can't grow it. So they just say, we're just getting deeper. We have a real mature church. And so they stop playing the
Right.
game because they can't win. And other guys are just pursue growth for the sake of growth because they're trying to impress everybody and want everybody to look how shiny and cool they look, and they're trying to be the next whatever, insert celebrity pastor that's on there. And so I think both of them can be harmful, but both of them are necessary for a church. Health and growth are both necessary. So a pastor has to really think about how do we, help. And here's the thing: those are both outputs. You can't make somebody become a disciple.
Right.
You can only do inputs. You give opportunities. You have small groups. You
Right.
have serve teams. And then with church growth, you just got to put the inputs in, but you cannot control the outputs. And that was my biggest problem that caused me a lot of anxiety and stress and not feeling because
Yes.
I, man, I wanted to control outputs and I couldn't see the outputs controlled. And I teach guys how to grow churches. I show them the strategies and I walk them through systems for that. And there are a lot of inputs you can put in, right? But I think at the end of the day, you plant the seeds. I know it's so like Christian and but then you water them, and then God makes it
True.
grow. I mean, you can't do it. And then I think the other thing is a man can have nothing unless the Lord gives it to him from heaven. And John the Baptist made one of the most profound statements of someone else having more success than him in ministry, and that
Hmm.
was his cousin Jesus, right? And I think that we have to have that mindset. This is what the Lord's given me to steward. We can't get into the mindset of Saul's got his thousands and David his ten thousands, because then again it's the comparison traps. You've been given people to steward and disciple, but you've also been given a community to reach, and both are mandates, but both are inputs only. And just because a guy's growing a church, it doesn't mean he's a great leader. Just because a guy's not going to church doesn't mean he's not a great leader. And I think that leader has to come to terms and have a
Hmm.
healthy, balanced view of that. And so that's kind of, that's my take on it. That's kind of how I approach it.
That makes sense. So it's like So let's say there's a guy and he's like struggling with shame in ministry. He wants things to grow. He wants to make a difference, and it's definitely driving him. But like at the same time, he knows that there are he knows that there are like depth issues. Like, what would you, if you're sitting down with them, and again, it would be longer when you're sitting down with someone at lunch, but if you're
Mhm.
thinking like 10,000, 30,000 feet even, what would you say to him about like, he comes to you, he's like, Kevin, I want to grow my church.
Mhm.
I want to make an impact. I want it to become great. What would your questions be for him, and what would kind of, if you were to be able to give him a pathway moving forward, what would you say are the major rocks on that pathway that going towards like whatever that vision or dream that he or she has?
Well, I think, when it comes to like, I mean, this is so important when it comes to systems. God has given you vision, and you need to pray down your vision for the church. But man, here's what guys mess up. They want to get vision for systems and creativity for systems. Don't do that. Find somebody who's doing it and doing it really well and borrow a system. Pray down your vision, but you borrow a system. And that's all I've done, man. I've had so much coaching. And now that's what I do with a group called Healthy Growing Multiplying Churches, HGM. I told a guy yesterday, I said, "Man, here's what we'll do for you. We'll give you your calendar and your systems. Then you create sermons, preach, and lead, but don't try to recreate the wheel and get so emotionally involved with something you created, invested into it, and it's not effective." So if a guy wants to grow a church, like find a church that has good systems for growth, not one that's growing. I mean, listen, you in Richmond, go to Midlothian or Short Pump, right, and like get you a building and just a Sunday service, and you're gonna get a bunch of suburban white people to show up there, right? I mean, they're just flocking. They're all moving out there, right? Not that the church is good, but that's just, hey, listen, you can grow a church quick just by doing that. Find somebody who had to work really hard at it and has really good systems at it, and it can show you the strategy of what they do. And then when it comes to discipleship, same thing. What are discipleship systems that are getting you results, right? So find somebody who's getting the results you want, that has a model that you like, and then borrow that, learn from them, go get coaching and consulting with it, and use your energy and time, not trying to create system, use your energy and time on leading your church. And when it comes to depth, so you mentioned the idea about a church growing in depth. The church
Yeah,
is only as deep as you are, man. And if you want the church to have depth, you need to have depth. So you need to deepen your well. That means again, there's going to be growth. It's going to be reading, growing, getting coaching, like counseling, dealing with your trauma. Listen, I have people all through our church going to counseling and getting therapy. You know why? Because I talk about it.
yeah,
So I have people in our church strength training, and I have 75-year-old men drinking protein shakes. Trying to,
nice,
but I think that they're going to mirror what you do. So when it comes to growth, get the systems in place. I don't have time to go through all the systems, but find
sure.
churches who model it and do it. And man, pay for some coaching. That's what I've done. I paid for lots of coaching, and benefited greatly from different organizations that's helped me. So I would say that to them.
That's awesome, man. So I want to shift topics just a little bit, thinking about like entering into this season, this next election season, right? Where
Yeah.
there's so much, right, vitriol, there's so much anger, there's so much people blaming the other
Yeah.
side, and virtue signaling and all of it that
Hmm.
we see. How does the church address the issue of political polarization within its own congregation and even potentially within the broader community?
Well,
What do you think?
well, number one, the pastor can't be party blind. And that means party blind is tell me three things that are really wrong with your party that you vote for. Tell
Hmm.
me three things wrong with your president. Because everybody can tell you what, listen, as somebody who's liberal can tell you all the things wrong with Donald Trump. Somebody who's conservative tell you
Yes.
all the things wrong with Biden. But I rarely meet somebody who say, man, these are three things I don't like about my own party. So I think the pastor cannot be party blind. He has to understand there are things that could be improved upon in their party that he wish wasn't true, right? Or so. And then you've got to give them a kingdom-minded perspective as well and show both sides. So I preached on cultural compromise this week. I mean, listen, man, Jesus, read the seven letters to seven churches, sexual morality and, false doctrines. And, he was really ticked off with these false teachers coming in and leading people astray. Kind of say, hey, do what makes you happy. So when I talk about cultural compromise, though, you can compromise not just by, like, let's say sexual morality and going that route. But another cultural compromise is this: hating a group of people or disparaging of them is also cultural compromise for conservatives,
Mm,
which I do lean conservative, right? I'm not going, I'm independent. No, I mean, I'm not going to, I don't care. I don't care what people think about me. But
sure.
with the immigration issue, is there a problem at the border? Yeah, this is huge. And if you, get past the main media, you can see, but here's the deal. Once somebody comes into this country, for God so loved the world, right? Go make
Right.
disciples of all nations. They're now our responsibility to be able to minister the gospel to and to love, right? And to care for. And I think that's things like that we don't address. We just want to like just point the finger at one party. But I think showing them a kingdom minded view and then telling them, listen, guys, you're not going to change anybody's mind on social media by making a post.
Yes.
Again, Hidden Brain from NPR, which again, I lean conservative. I love some of the things that David Honda has, on Hidden Brain. People won't respond to logic. They will only when they're emotionally attached to something, right? And so I don't care how much logic you give somebody. If they're emotionally attached to an idea, it won't matter. Stop. I mean,
Mm.
I tell our people, and it's gotten a lot better over the years of these, of posting and trying to shame and beat up the other party, with that there. So again, I think that's the way that we handle it. And I tell people to go vote, man, go vote your conscience, vote your values, vote what's important to you. But I'm not going to, also try to polarize it. I got to depolarize it. And especially for the sake of the gospel,
Yes.
you can win an argument about politics, but then lose that person as well. There.
Yeah. I love hearing about what you're preaching. How do you deal with some of these policy issues? Do you hit policy in the pulpit? Maybe not policy, but like these really, maybe that's a wrong word, but like these really huge cultural issues, right?
Yeah.
Like we all know, right? The LGBTQ issues, the abortion issues, religious
Yeah.
freedom issues, immigration issues, right? Environmental issues, gun control, all these
Hmm.
things. Do we talk about those things in the pulpit? Do we push those things to a different context where conversation happens more? What do you think?
I will only address something that's biblical and that's not cultural. I mean, the gun issue is
Mm,
a national governmental issue, right? I don't need to talk about gun control with that. I have my own
mm,
beliefs about it, and I have my own.
sure,
Yeah, I mean, the balanced view is that there has to be measures on guns, but then you also don't want to set up the wrong leader to come in and take all guns away. I mean, that's how, again, there's
sure.
a balance, right? So I'm not going to address that. Now, when it comes to things like LGBTQ, I mean, according to the scriptures, yeah, I mean, that's not a lifestyle that again, the Lord is that he instituted. According to our scriptures, we only know that marriage between a man and a woman is acceptable. But here's what you do: you have to love people. Like the other day, I had a guy come to me, and he's yeah, he has a partner. I'm not sure if they're married or not, but he wants to sit down and talk with me before he gets baptized and just kind of understand and share his story. And man, things like that. And I dealt with cultural compromise today, but I didn't try to make a point about any one topic. I wanted the Holy Spirit to speak. When it comes to LGBTQ, man, yeah, we love people who come in who are LGBTQ, man. We love on them, but we also have standards. Like we just this is what we believe, right? But you'll be loved here. So but I don't try to point out any one thing and say, oh, I'm going to teach about homosexuality. Now I will, like we do frequently asked questions. I'll deal with that. When it comes to the issue of Israel and Palestine, hey, I mean, I brought that up Sunday. And I'm gonna tell you something. That's a biblical
Yeah.
issue. And all these, people who, again, we're being taught to disparage Israel. And I'm telling you, that's a biblical issue. And I said, we're cultural. You get to either believe what the Bible says about something, or what culture is imposing on it. You only have two options. When it comes to Israel, the Bible is very clear about that. There is no gray area, right? And there's so much in our media we're not being told about that anyway. With Hamas,
Hmm.
I mean, there's so much there. But I did let them know, listen, with things like that, yeah, no, that's a biblical issue. I mean, abortion and human rights, that's a biblical issue. That we, that I am going to make statements on, but I don't try to make points about that in the pulpit, if you know what I mean. Like I'm not trying to bring all those up to the forefront and deal with just those issues, but we do in Sanctity of Human Life. We do celebrate that. We support pregnancy help centers and give them finances and volunteers, there, and we do believe in the covenant of man and woman in marriage. But hey, for those that are LGBTQ and they want to know more about that, they've got to make their own decisions after they read the scriptures,
Right.
right? But I'm not going to shame them, or because I don't want somebody in our congregation to feel like I'm trying to single them out either and make a point of them, because there's not that many that would be in our congregation, right? So to bring that one topic up would really be, I think to bring it up in a very non-tactful way would be really hurtful to
Right.
someone. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think is like some of the most important issues? Like if they were to come to you, leaders of the five largest denominations in
Mm-hmm.
the United States, if they
Mm-hmm.
were to come to you and say, "Hey, Kevin, we want to know from you what is the church facing right now, where they have to really think about this in a deeper way and work through this and come up with some kind of unity around this issue X, Y, and Z." What do you feel like those issues are that the church needs unity around as we're moving forward and even deeper into the 21st century with everything happening in America and around the world?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think again, and this is something that it's very sensitive. But I do believe that LGBTQI and those issues, it's a very sensitive issue. But something that I say this correctly, but morality and acceptance of things I mean, right now there are groups trying to push pedophilia being acceptable. Well, no, 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 that'll never happen. Well, people didn't think that there
Mm,
would be, a trans preacher. There are now, but whatever you believe is right or wrong, that's on you. So, I think for me, we have to be very careful in, like, right now, the Methodists just overturned. You saw what the Methodist Church just did with gay clergy, and that, hey, now they're fully accepting of that and things of that nature. I just think we need to be really careful. There's a balance between being accepting and loving and then crossing biblical guidelines. And man, I'm telling you, Jesus said, I'll come to remove your lampstand. And the lampstand is our ability to be salt and light, right? To bring healing and hope. And I just think that we're on a slippery slope, man. I mean, it really, right now we're talking, but if we're alive 40 years from now, there's going to be a lot that's acceptable in church that you're thought, what? No, but yeah,
yeah.
it's like a frog being boiled. It's 1 degree at a time, where it's more and it's more and it's more. I think that's one of the major issues that we got to come against, and I think too we got to continue to protect freedom of religion and freedom of speech. I mean, them shutting down churches and deeming them as not essential, it was a big deal. That was huge. No matter how,
Mm,
I mean that was huge. That the draconian measures were like now, and now we're now all the now, and the funny thing is, we don't get any more research now being released on COVID. It's all silent now, and now they've retracted
mm.
so much that, and they're not, and we don't even get like, "Hey, I'm sorry about that," right?
Right.
Yeah, right. It's just kind of like, let's just pretend that never. Okay, yeah, the whole if you're not, what is it? If you're not, you might have asymptomatic, then you can still care. Well, that was bull jive. It wasn't even true. And now they're retracting all of that. So I think we just have to be really careful that we continue to understand that there are groups of people who would love to shut the church completely down, and but it doesn't happen at once. It happens
Right.
by little freedoms being taken. by censorship, by, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the separation of church and state is very important. The people who came over here, they wanted to practice Protestantism, but there's a state church who was imposing things on them, saying you can't say this, you can't do that, you got to
Right.
do this. And they came for that freedom. I mean, and people that today want to kind of talk about the separation of church and state, that's not saying that the church can't speak about issues. That has nothing to do with
Right.
that. So we have to understand that we cannot get back to the place where England came in and England began to institute and tell the church what it could and couldn't do. That's why this whole nation moved over. That's why we had the revolution. That's why all this stuff,
Right.
well, one of the reasons. But so
Sure.
these are two major issues, though, two major ones. And abortion, of course, to me, is another key issue that we have got to continue to understand that it's, people say in the case of like rape and incest, that's always the argument, right? Always. And so, you
Right.
know what?
Hmm.
And in those cases, somebody probably does need to sit down with their family and make some decisions on something.
Yeah.
Not that I would agree with it, but I'm gonna tell you something, Josh. I didn't grow up as a Christian. What abortion was used for and mostly is used for are people who want to have sex without condoms, don't want to take birth control, and then they don't want responsibility. And I grew up with people who just say, well, I got pregnant. I said, oops, let's go have an abortion. Yeah, we just dealt with a girl, 16-year-olds in our church, got knocked up by another 16-year-old guy, and she decided to have the baby. And now the boy didn't have it. He was like, oh, and the parents, oh, it'll ruin his life, and they just kind of dipped out.
Hmm.
And this 16-year-old girl loves this little boy. I mean, he's loved by the church. He's running around. She's got a great family support behind her. I mean, could
Right.
you imagine with our logic today, you're 16, you're going to ruin your life, abort this baby if that would have been used, this little sweet child.
Yeah.
So I think those are issues that we have to navigate and deal with. But I think the issue with LGBTQ, it needs to be dealt with tactfulness, right? But we also are able to have opinions about things. I think
Right.
I can have my opinion. It doesn't mean I'm a phobia. I'm not scared of anybody who's gay. I'm not scared of them. I'm not homophobic. The scriptures inform me that lifestyle is not one that's biblical. If you're not a believer, go do what you want to do. I don't care. Go marry 100 people. I don't care. But if you're a believer, then the scripture should inform you. So that's kind of where
Yeah.
I'm at with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to that position, and I totally understand what you're saying. I think that I would agree that those seem to be three major issues that
Yeah.
the church seems like it's kind of all over the place on, and trying to figure out how to minister to people who are in those places will continue to be even more, I think, crucial
Yes.
as the culture continues to shift.
Yes.
Right, it
Yeah.
continues to move in a way that's different. This is kind of my last question,
Yeah.
and we have a diverse audience that listens to Faithful Politics. Now, this is
Yeah.
a faith roundtable, a little bit of a different audience,
Yeah.
but my guess is there's still going to be the same kind of hoping for the same kind of diversity.
Yeah.
But what is something like a message that you would want people to hear from your heart, like about just, I mean, it doesn't have to be about anything in particular that we've talked about. It could be a reiteration of something we've already said. But what do you feel like is the most like the thing that's weighing on your heart the most right now that people would hear from you as a pastor, a leader, a Christian
Yeah.
man in our context?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important message is I think people really, I mean, a side note and nuance in the season, we can disagree and still be friends. I mean, that's able to just, I just
I
disagree with
hope
you.
so, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but I think that the biggest thing people really need to take back is take care of yourself. I mean, again, it's cliche, but the oxygen mask, on the airplane, if there's to be something happen, take care of yourself first. We've got to learn to care for ourselves, and we've got to learn to stop saying, "Well, my situation is not bad as somebody else." We've got to learn to deal, as I said before, deal with these issues in our heart, man, and care for ourselves. And we need to be in community. If you're a leader, pastors are the most isolated people I know. We need some
Mm,
good friends we can just call. Most pastors don't have a best friend that they do life with. They have people in their church that they're at a convenience and transactional relationships. They have it, but I have a few best friends that are in my life, and I would say get in community, take care of yourself, look introspectively. Oh Lord, search my heart. Show me anything in there that offends you, my anxious thoughts, like that. Oh Lord, search my heart. That needs to be like um, I think the mantra. And take care of yourself. Learn to love yourself. Learn to be proud of yourself. I mean, that's the greatest commandment. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. If you're filled with shame and bitterness, the people who are the most angry at others and hateful toward others, they hate themselves. The people who are the most loving and kind and empathetic to others, usually they really do love themselves. And so that'll be my message to people.
That's really good. How can people get more information on Thrive Church? How can they follow you? If you're on
Yeah.
social media, how can they connect with you?
Well, again, Instagram is at Kevin Bordeaux. My name, all one word. Facebook is Kevin Bordeaux. Look me up, and then Thrive Church. The website is thrivechurch.me, like me or you. So thrivechurch.me is the website, and then you can search us on YouTube as well. We have all of our rebroadcast of sermons. We're going through a whole series in Revelation right now, so people are loving that. And walking through that weekly. But yeah, that's the best place to find me if you're looking for me, or find me at one of the YMCA's lifting weights. Yeah,
That's right. Well, this
yeah,
has
man.
been Kevin Bordeaux. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Kevin,
man.
for coming on the show. It's been such a honor and a delight to talk with you. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you,
this
man.
conversation.
It's been my honor. Thank you so much, Josh, and bless all you're doing, man. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for joining another episode of the Faith Roundtable. Please subscribe and follow us. Let us know if you have questions. Put it in the comments or get to our website, faithfulpolitics. I think it's .net. I should know that. Shoot. Well, it's faithfulpolitics.com, but then we changed it to something
Hey, yeah,
else, but
hey, and
faithfulpolitics.com.
here's a cool thing about being kind to yourself. It doesn't matter, does it, in the
Hey,
long scheme
Google
of
Faithful
things?
Politics. You're going to
Just
find it.
just Google it. How do you find me? Google me. You'll find me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Well,
right.
guys, we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, and God bless.